What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video I'll be taking you through the forward review, the second installment of our positional review for the preseason. Now if you guys haven't checked out our defender review, I recommend going and checking it out. I'll leave a link in the description. Really does dive into those defensive contributions. But I decided to switch things around from back to front, and now let's go over our striking or forward partners. Now I don't know about you guys, but when I've been making my drafts, I would probably say the forwards are the least locked in position at the current moment. Haven't really seen too many of them that I actually want to pick, but let's see if this video kind of gives us some clarity. I think with the introduction of these defensive contributions, it's put all our attention on the defenders and even some midfielders, and the forwards seem to have been left a little bit behind. So let's finally give them some attention that they probably do deserve, and in this video I'll be diving deep into the stats to hopefully give us some indication of who's the best striker to pick. Now unfortunately we won't be going over any new signings from Arsenal, that sort of thing. I'll leave the big striker for one of my kind of videos a little bit sooner to the deadline, as I want to see how he performs in preseason with that Arsenal squad. There might be some speculation about Isaac's future. Will he stay at Newcastle or will he be going to Liverpool? So obviously with those talking points, you guys can decide a little bit closer to the deadline. I'm just going to assume that he stays at Newcastle though. But enough of the yapping, let's get straight into this one. Sit back, relax, and hopefully you guys do enjoy it. Now before we go over the first draft, I just want to clarify that not every striker you'll be seeing on screen. It's only the ones that have been filtered or at least have played 65 average minutes and have played a total of 15 games. That's just because we want to really dive into who's the most reliable strikers. You know, there's always that one player that comes off the bench and just gets a ton of XG. So the first graph I want to talk about is going to be a summary of those strikers that do fulfill those filters. This is going to be the total points per 90 as well as the price tag. And I also want to clarify that I have used the positional disadvantages for Jarrod Bowen, taking him from a midfielder to a forward. So the total points you guys see on screen has been a deduction. As you guys know, midfielders get an extra point per goal. This is basically how Jarrod Bowen would have performed as a striker last season, and he's going to be slap bang on that linear regression line. Now what you guys have probably also noticed on the far right hand side is going to be Erling Haaland. Yes, he is below the line, but don't worry, that's just because he's so expensive. And if you guys are going to captain him anyways, he's going to double in points, and therefore that makes him great value. Now this does kind of open up the debate in terms of is Erling Haaland worth it if you guys don't captain him, but that's the same with any premium, and that's something that we're going to have to decide before the deadline. I won't lie though, haven't seen too many Erling Haaland plus Salah drafts floating around, as FPL's got the pricing pretty bang on, but my short conclusion is I probably wouldn't go for him unless you guys do want to captain him every other game week. So what I'm going to do on screen right now is I'm actually going to take out Erling Haaland because he does skew the weighting quite a bit in terms of the regression line. So now you guys see the graph without it. So that does put Isaac on slap bang in the middle of the kind of regression line and therefore makes him okay value. And this gives us a good indication of which players actually are worth their price tag and who's not. The one I automatically notice is going to be Dom Solanke. Now his points per 90 minutes last season were pretty bad, but I think overall Spurs weren't too great. And the thing about him this season is with Son confirmed leaving, he's definitely probably the first penalty taker. How many penalties Spurs do get, I don't exactly know, I can't predict the future, but it does make him a better option. Now unfortunately taking out Erling Haaland now makes Jarrod Bowen probably less valuable, and my conclusion on him is that if he's going to be playing even in the same position but now classified as a forward, definitely does hinder his performance that extra point per goal that he will be scoring. But focusing on some players that look slightly better, on Ollie Watkins, nice to see his popularity is increasing at the moment. He looks like good value. João Pedro, even though he was at Brighton, good performance, how will that kind of knock on with Chelsea? And obviously the man of last season, Chris Wood, overperforming his XG by a mile, but if he can do it again, he's always going to be good value. In my first draft, I had Danny Welbeck. I do like him, especially if Brighton don't have many kind of attacking kind of coverage positions. Otherwise, Trent Larson also was there at that minimum price tag. In my latest draft, Evan Nielsen hasn't had the best performance, but I still do like his stats. I think he's good. And everyone knows about Mateta absolutely banging in preseason. Now the talking point I want to go over is similar to the kind of defender review, and these per 90 minutes can actually be inflated sometimes. The reason for this is that if a striker doesn't play the full 90, any reduction in those minutes is going to inflate their stats. and therefore a better metric might actually be using total points per game. So what this kind of shows you is the realistic or actual points per game that these strikers did score. You can see that there's been a kind of shift downwards for Ollie Watkins as he wasn't playing the full 90 minutes that often, and then a slight reduction for most players as most of them should have been playing 90 minutes total. For example, Isaac at the top right hand side, he's barely moved because he was playing the majority of minutes, but some other players like João Pedro have had some movement more towards the regression line. This is just something to take into account, and when you guys are looking at stats or per 90 minute stats, always keep this in your mind. They're basically saying how a player would perform if they played the full 90, but that's not always the case. So to just kind of go one step further, let's actually show the minutes that these players were featuring in. I mentioned Ollie Watkins, he had a pretty kind of weird season last season, wasn't the most nailed, and that's why his average minutes were around the 68 minute mark. Otherwise, players like Erling Haaland, Jared Bowen, Isaac, all these options play 80 plus minutes, which you probably would expect out of your number one strikers. That kind of 70 to 75 minute bracket, it's what I spoke about João Pedro with, and the reason I wasn't necessarily looking to choose him this season is just I think that he gets the maximum that, and then a second striker comes on for Chelsea, which isn't optimal for your full 90 minutes. I will say that the majority of these players should be playing at least 70 plus minutes, which should be an adequate amount of time, but as always, try and maximize your expected minutes. Now let's go into the actual attacking stats and what makes these players strikers. The first graph we're going to go over is XG non-penalty versus XA. I just prefer the non-penalty variant as it's quite hard to predict penalties at the end of the day. Now what I would say is that if you guys have a similar player in terms of non-penalty XG, obviously if player A has penalties and player B doesn't, you go with player A, but I always like to use the non-penalty variant with my comparisons. Now it might not be the most useful to use XG and XA because your striker, as you guys can see, is definitely going to prioritize the XG metric, but Jared Bowen and João Pedro at least have some assisting threat. Isaac, also a little bit of anomaly there, has both stats at the end of the day, but before we talk about XG involvement, I just wanted to show this metric. So XG involvement combines both those two numbers. Let's now look if we were to rate these players according to price. I'm going to include Erling Haaland back here because his stats are really strong. I didn't want to put too much of a negative connotation on Erling Haaland with that points metrics, as he didn't have the best season last season, and I'm sure he's going to bounce back this one. But from this, you guys can kind of see which attackers are getting those good stats. Isaac, really nice to see his stats are continuing. Visa had a great season. Nicholas Jackson, as you guys know, definitely underperforms his XG, not the most clinical finisher. And this actually puts Dom Solanke closer to that line, which just shows that his finishing wasn't that great. Just a nice little kind of metric to compare these players, removing the points, actually looking at the expected numbers. But this does rely on the fact that these strikers do finish the chances, which isn't always the case. The one player that I want you guys to actually just focus on here and maybe keep it in your mind is going to be Chris Wood, basically the same XG involvement as João Pedro. So now let's actually go and look and see which strikers are prolific at actually converting that XG involvement. And this is going to be non-penalty goals versus XG. So you guys know I told you to focus on Chris Wood, had a pretty low XG number, but just look at the non-penalty goals per 90 minutes, just an elite finisher at the end of the day. Now how consistent that's going to be from season to season, who kind of knows? There was always speculation on my point of view, or a little bit of doubt that crept in last season as I didn't own him I think at all. I just don't back that he can keep it up, but this season he could actually, and I'll look like an absolute clown again. But basically what you guys want to see here is that these players do have a consistent relationship between XG non-penalty and non-penalty goals, and that's why you see a little bit of a diagonal line from left to right. So if a player is on the underside, it's going to mean that they're not the best finisher. If they're on the top side, it means that they're pretty much clinical. And I would probably say that you guys want to meet somewhere in the middle. So at the moment, I think Mateta, Watkins, in terms of these finishing stats, look pretty good. Evan Nielsen does worry me slightly as I picked him currently, would probably want that finishing to be a little bit better. Otherwise, your elite players like an Erling Haaland and an Isaac look simply outstanding. You might notice a little bit of an anomaly there at the top right hand side, and that's going to be Visa. I mean, just think about this. At Visa's price tag, he's in the same bracket as an Isaac and an Erling Haaland. If he stayed at Brentford, he could have been absolute magic. Will he move to Newcastle? Will he stay at Brentford? They've lost a ton of players, and Bumo included. How's that going to affect their attacking performance? It's probably a wait and see for me, but if he does look okay, that could be great. I would have probably liked to see Ollie Watkins' numbers being slightly higher here. I would probably say though, if he does become a bit more nailed and he's showing me that he's going to be getting the minutes, his per 90 minute stats won't increase, but at least his game time will. At his price point, if I could just go for someone like a Strand Larsen, Mateta, Evan Nielsen and get similar numbers, I could even back Chris Wood and still get a similar output. So I'm just going to raise that point there. I do like Ollie Watkins, but I think at his price point, I want to see a bit more. Let's see how he progresses through the preseason. So to just drive the point of elite finishes, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a bonus graph here. And this is going to be non-penalty shots per 90 minutes versus the non-penalty goals. So a little bit of a proxy for kind of non-penalty XG, except this is going to be the actual shots that players do take. And as you guys can see, you probably want a little bit of a similar relationship. So on the top left-hand side, Chris Wood is basically having no shots per 90 minutes, but he's scoring a ton of goals. And you guys know that from last season, he'd have one shot on target a game, but he would score it. On the other side is going to be Raul Jimenez, has a ton of shots, but not converting those goals. And that's where Nicholas Jackson and Evan Nielsen also kind of fit in. Otherwise, your elite shot takers and elite goal scorers on the top right-hand side. And as mentioned, this trend should be similar to what we saw in the previous graph. Just another lens, I guess, to showcase which finishers are actually good. You guys know I love going over various stats. So I know I mentioned I didn't go over any of the new strikers. We'll be discussing those in probably some ultimate guides closer to the deadline. I just want to get as much information as possible before selecting them. The last thing that you guys want to do is choose a new striker and then they're not playing for the club. And with a lot of new elite strikers for the top 4 clubs, hopefully we get some more clarity over the upcoming days. I won't lie to you guys though, I think the striker position this season is probably the toughest one to pick. I think that's why most people are actually looking to go for kind of a common elite asset. And since they can't afford a Haaland, there's speculation about an Isaac, I think Ollie Watkins probably fits that bill. I guess we could go for some cheaper options. If Chris Wood can replicate the form of last season, he's going to be gold still. But otherwise, the Strand Larsen is putting up some good numbers, but can he keep up this elite finishing? All eyes on Visa. If he stays at Brentford, he could still be an option. But if he does move to another club and is their number 1 striker, I still do back the stats. So in the comments down below, what do you guys think about these strikers? Who's your current strikers? Do you have 1, 2, 3 in your current draft? And who's your favorite at the moment? Is anyone out there going for the Erling Haaland and no Salah draft? His numbers do look pretty outstanding. This is basically our video, guys. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Please like it and subscribe if you've subscribed yet. We have the goalkeeper review coming up shortly, and then the banger of a midfielder review. So make sure those notifications are turned on so that you guys don't miss a video. But for the time being, I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.